Hey, what's up, y'all? It's your girl, Honestly Nay, here for another episode of SexualiTea, and I am here with
Shadeen Francis.
Shadeen. What's up?
Hi.
Hey, thank you so much for coming on the show. So, tell us about you. Who are you? What do you do?
Sure. So I am a marriage and family therapist. I specialize in sex therapy and social justice. I'm also an educator, so I teach counseling in the Master's of Science program at Lincoln. I also teach some classes over at Jefferson. This is based out of Philly. I'm also a corporate trainer. I'm an author. I'm a conference presenter. I'm a wearer of hats.
Yes, you are. Lots of hats. That's good, though. I see you on your hustle. Cool. So I hear that you're an educator. You do marriage and family therapy counseling. So what's like one of the biggest issues you see when people come to you and they need like marriage and relationship counseling?
I think a lot of what it tends to boil down to is boundary issues.
Okay.
Quite often, first of all, folks like to seek me out post-affair. So while I do sort of a spectrum of things, just because of some of the ways that I work, folks really like to come in to really negotiate their relationship, sometimes post-crisis, like an affair, but also my work supports and celebrates families and relationships of all kinds. So kinky folks, non-monogamous folks, non-straight, non-cis folks, right? So a lot of them are really struggling with how do we take the ways that we define our relationship and turn it into something that works. And sometimes there's not another model, there's not another framework. Sometimes we have expectations that don't get met. And quite often, either we're not aware of our own boundaries because we don't know what to expect, or maybe we didn't really clarify our boundaries, and now we've had issues of maybe betrayal or boundary crossings that are really hurting our relationships.
So you keep using this word boundaries. What are boundaries? What do you mean?
Boundaries are one of my favorite B words. So a lot of times when people think about boundaries, they think about all of like the hard lines, all of the no's. But when I think about boundaries, I actually think about all of the spaces in between. Right? If we were to think about our relationships as structures that we can see out in the world, right? That if you were to connect with a person and be thinking about what are the boundaries around our relationship, we could think about, okay, what are the hard lines around our relationship? But we could also think about what are all the spaces that are, or what are all the things that are contained in between, right? So not just the no's, what are all of the yeses? What are all of the things that we're welcoming in? What are the things that we want to be holding on to? And where are all of the places in which I'm flexible? Right? So boundaries would include, I don't want you to do that. I do want you to, yes, please do that. I think I would be okay with you doing that, but only in the afternoon on the third Thursday of the equinox. Right?
So boundaries are specific. Or they
our best boundaries are clear. Our best boundaries are specific. Our best boundaries acknowledge context, right? So our boundaries really are context dependent. So there really are times when I don't want you to do that, but in certain instances it might be okay. And our boundaries have to be conversational, right? It doesn't have to be negotiable. You absolutely can have a hard boundary. But our boundaries really are meant to be communicated, or else how is anyone going to know that the boundary is there?
We're all supposed to be mind readers. Shadeen, you didn't know?
The analogy I often use, right? So ideally, right, our boundaries are like a room, right? So there are 4 walls, right? There's a window so that we can see out, right? There's doors so that we can let things in, right? But you still have to knock in order to be let in, right? But you're always welcome to leave, right? And these could be our relationships, or the boundaries around our relationships, right? These could be boundaries around some of our feelings. They could be boundaries around some of maybe our habits or routines. But what quite often happens is that folks either make boundaries that are sort of like lines in the sand, right? So people are walking all up in and out of our space and don't even notice, right? Or we think that we need to be really aggressive and build these concrete towers, right, that really don't allow for any flexibility, and sometimes we feel really trapped or isolated. So we want to acknowledge that maybe our boundaries can be flexible, right, but we need to really be checking in with ourselves and get as best of an understanding as we can about what doesn't work and what are all the things that work.
So when you're like exploring what your boundaries are, trying to figure out what those are, is it better to start that initial journey like by yourself, or is it better to wait until you have a partner or partners or some kind of relationship format to work out exactly how your boundaries will work in this situation?
Yeah, it's tricky because although we always want to sort of plan ahead, right, that most of our learning about boundaries actually comes from experience. We're actually really poor predictors of how we're going to feel about a thing until the thing happens, right? So that doesn't mean that you have to like try all things, right? You can definitely use your best guess and from your own experiences or from the experiences of folks around you to be thinking about, okay, that probably would not feel good for me, or that wouldn't be safe for me, or I'm just not interested in that. But it can really be either or, right? Either you're happy to be experimental with someone that you trust, right? Or you have enough trust and safety in yourself and the things that you're exploring to say, hey, I would like to welcome another person into that journey with me, right? Or you can absolutely be sort of taking that step by step and really sitting and processing with yourself, right? Getting to know yourself so that you can really communicate with other people ahead of time about what you do and don't want. So it can be very much a bi-directional process, in that as you go out and experience things with folks, you learn more about yourself. As you learn more about yourself, you can communicate about the kinds of things you want to experience with folks, right? And it goes on.
Okay. I like that. So speaking of like being on this journey with yourself, I know that self-care is really, really important with you. But there's like there's a type of self-care that you put a lot of energy into. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I often talk about sex as self-care. And while I don't personally believe that's revolutionary, I think that folks often just aren't considering their sexual selves as parts of them that need care, as well as a tool for when we are wanting healing or peace or leisure or fun. Right? So.
Nice. So then what does being in the right brain space or being in like the right energy to be able to use sex as self-care, what does that look like? How do you get there?
Yeah, I think first, even just recognizing and acknowledging maybe where you are in your sexual self, right? So even though, larger languaging would say that we're all sexual beings, we're all sexual to different degrees, and some folks would prefer, right, to not experience themselves, right, in really concrete or specific or explicit sexual ways, right? And that's absolutely great, right? But recognizing that if you experience yourself, sexually, right, that all healing is connected. That we have so many, I talk about planes of being very often, and there's so many planes of being that we exist on, and I talk about 7, and a lot of this comes from literature on like decolonial perspectives of healing, right? And so when I think about these planes of being, we can think about spiritual, intellectual, aesthetic, so witnessing and appreciating beauty, right? Social, emotional, sexual, and recreational, right? So leisure and rest and hobbies, right? And so sometimes we have, for example, an emotional wound. We can very easily see the connection between having an emotional wound and maybe seeking some sort of spiritual healing, right? If you're a religious person, maybe you turn to church, right? If you're not a religious person, maybe you start to think about what things in the world give you purpose and meaning, right? If we're feeling like we're struggling socially, we can see how maybe doing something recreational could really help, right? So knowing that all of our systems are interconnected, I think quite often we miss how meaningful, right, sex can be as not just an activity, but as a practice of healing, right? And so keeping that in your awareness, right, giving energy, giving pleasure, giving gentleness, giving roughness, right, giving attention, right, giving yourself pleasure or connecting in pleasure with another consenting person or consenting people can absolutely do so much when you're feeling stuck, when you're feeling tired, when you're feeling stressed, when you're feeling oppressed or condensed or fraught.
I like that. As we look at the 7 planes of being, I'm gonna have to look into that, because that is true that we exist. We have all these different roles. We wear all these different hats. We exist in all these different places at the same time, and all these different things need their own identifiable things at those times. So that's something really interesting. It's not something that I thought about, because definitely, like, sex is self-care. Like, first thing that came to my mind is, like, I have needs. Like, I have this drive that needs to be fulfilled. And, after you're done, like, you do feel, or at least I do feel better. I feel more centered. I feel more aligned with what I'm trying to achieve. And you get that burst of energy, and you get that opportunity to hopefully to rest and relax afterwards, kind of thing. So.
Yeah, and so we don't actually have to address all problems at the level at which the problem was created. And I know that is sort of a reversal of a lot of what we talk about in other spaces, right? Where you say, go to the root, target it at the source. But I think that misses just the fact that we don't always have resources at every level, right? We don't always have opportunities to make things different in that particular space, right? That let's say you're in a point in time at which you are really just, let's say social again, right? Let's say that you're really just socially exhausted, right? You don't have people around you that you connect with on a deep level. You don't enjoy the company of people around you. Maybe people are, it's challenging phrasing, but feeling very toxic for you, right? You can't always choose who you're around. Yes, you can separate yourself from people, but that doesn't necessarily bring other people towards you. And depending on your context, maybe this is just where you're at for the time being. Right? And if we have to solve every problem at the level at which they're created exclusively, then you're stuck, right? You're SOL. You have, right? There are no more resources. But knowing that our system is interconnected, knowing that we're energetic creatures, right? Are there other ways that we can be pouring into ourselves, right? To keep ourselves more full, to protect ourselves from feeling as empty or depleted, right? So maybe you do spend a lot more time nurturing yourself in an emotional way. Maybe you do start to pursue beauty out in the world, right? Maybe you're not recognizing beauty really in the people around you, but maybe you go out in nature and can experience beauty. Right? Can you notice beauty in yourself? Can you grow, your intellectual capacity to be thinking about other solutions, right? Sex is absolutely also a tool that you can be using in those points in time, right? If you're feeling depleted, if you're feeling unloved or unnurtured, right? Sex is a space in which you can have some of those things, right? Maybe you're doing that just with yourself, right? Maybe you're just witnessing, right? Porn, voyeurism, consensual voyeurism.
That and that starts there.
Disclaimer. Right? But, really recognizing that there is so much freedom in experiencing pleasure, and sometimes we don't have other means of pleasure available, and we're always entitled to it, right? Sex can be a liberation space, and I think that we often only think about sex to address sexual needs. Or we only use sex as a tool for healing for other people. Right? That I see that often in relationships where folks participate in sex generously, right, but for their partner. Right? And what about that for self?
Oh, See, I hear the opposite. You usually hear that people are having sex to get theirs. They're not concerned with whether or not their partner is fulfilled or self-actualized. They're concerned with getting their nut, and then they're ready.
Maybe it's a community hazard of the work that I do.
Well, so where can we find you? What if we have more questions for Shadeen?
Yeah, so I have a website that is currently under construction, but you can still find me there. It's my name, ShadeenFrancis.com. The work around the planes of being, I am working on expanding that into some workshops. So if you would like to hear more about that, you can definitely keep your eye on my website, and very soon there will be information being posted and sent out about that. If you'd like to find me other places, I am working really hard at participating in Twitter. I am trying.
That's what I tell people. I'm like, I don't tweet all that much, but if you tweet me on the first full moon of the month, when I I'll tweet you back.
Yeah, so I'm one of the few millennials who, did not get caught in the social media wave. So I'm crawling. And so, please be patient with me, but I'm good about responding. Okay. It doesn't always occur to me to start a conversation, but I'm very happy to participate. So those are the two kind of best places to find me. If you have a conversation that you'd like to have with me, on my website, you can also be tracking where I end up. So I'm at a ton of conferences speaking. I do a ton of corporate training, so you can hire me, you can consult with me. I can be part of your journey.
Yes, she can. All of her contact information I'm going to put down below. Thank you so much, Shadeen, for being on Sexuality and expanding your wonderful brainness with us. All right, y'all. I'm going to check you later. Bye.